If you walked into a factory in Orange, New Jersey in 1918, you'd think you'd stumbled into a room full of ghosts. A group of teenage girls, sitting together, literally glowing. Their hair shimmered, their dresses brushed against each other, leaving trails of faint green light. When they laughed, their teeth flashed in the dark. They looked like magic. But underneath the skin, a completely different process had already begun. The light they wore home on their clothes wasn't a fashion statement. It was a countdown, and it was already too late to stop it. To understand how these teenagers ended up in that glowing room, you have to look at how the world viewed a newly discovered element called radium. Discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie, it had become one of the world's great wonder substances. If someone could sell it, someone added radium to it. Toothpaste, cosmetics, water, beauty creams, even health tonics. The public swallowed it willingly, convinced they were drinking pure vitality. So when the United States Radium Corporation opened a factory to paint military watch dials for the war effort, the jobs were highly coveted. For a working-class girl, walking onto that factory floor felt like winning the lottery. The pay was 3 times higher than typical factory work. But more than that, it was fun. The workers weren't strangers. They were sisters, cousins, and best friends. There was Molly Maggia, just 24, quick-witted and the life of the room. Her sister, Quinta, sat right next to her. Across the table was Grace Fryer, 18, quiet, observant, and saving up her wages for a family home. They spent 8 hours a day gossiping, singing popular radio tunes and sharing secrets. The work was precise, but simple, or at least it seemed simple. The numbers on the watch faces were tiny. To paint them, the girls used delicate camel hair brushes. But after a few strokes, the fine bristles would naturally split. If a line blurred, the watch was ruined. To keep the line moving, the managers gave them a trick. 3 words: lip, dip, paint. Again and again, hundreds of times every single shift. Did they ask if it was safe? Of course they did. But the supervisors just smiled. They told them the substance was so harmless it would actually improve their health. Why wouldn't they believe them? The girls leaned into the novelty of it. They called themselves the Ghost Girls. Before heading out to local dance halls on Friday nights, they would tease each other at the workbenches, painting glowing numbers on their fingernails. They dusted the green powder into their hair, so they would stand out on the crowded dance floors. Molly Maggia even painted her teeth before a date, laughing at the shock on her boyfriend's face when the streetlights faded. It was a game. A beautiful, high-paying game. But physics doesn't care about a game, and it certainly doesn't care about human innocence. Every time a girl sharpened her brush, she swallowed a fraction of a milligram of radium. Inside the body, the elements play by strict rules. The human system welcomed the radium like an old friend. It mistook it for calcium, quietly carrying it through the bloodstream, and locking it directly into the skeleton. Once inside the bone, the guest turned into an invader. The radium began to decay, firing off continuous, high-energy particles from within. It didn't burn their skin. It attacked their marrow, mutating their cells and dismantling their living structure piece by piece, 24 hours a day. How do you fight an enemy that's already inside your bones? The answer came in 1922. Molly Maggia noticed a dull, nagging ache in her lower jaw. A dentist pulled the troublesome tooth, expecting the tissue to heal. It didn't. The socket remained open, weeping pus. Within weeks, the teeth on either side began to loosen and rot. Soon she could no longer chew properly. Smiling hurt. Speaking exhausted her. Friends stopped recognizing the woman who had once laughed the loudest in the factory. The true horror came during a routine examination. Her dentist gently pressed against her jawbone to locate the source of the swelling. With a slight pressure, the entire bone shattered under his fingers. The radium had hollowed it out, transforming her jaw into a blackened, brittle honeycomb. Molly died less than a year later, at just 24 years old. The official death certificate listed the cause as syphilis, a convenient diagnosis for the company. A deeply shameful one for her grieving family. Then, the other ghost girls began to break. Their bones grew so fragile that leaning against a counter could fracture a hip. The mere weight of stepping out of bed in the morning caused ankles to snap like dry twigs. They were decaying from the inside out, while still fully conscious. As the desks inside the factory began to empty, the executives at the U.S. Radium Corporation made a decision. In their private laboratories, the company's founders and scientists used heavy lead screens, aprons, and metal tongs to handle the radium. They protected themselves perfectly, yet they hadn't given the girls a single warning. When Grace Fryer realized the connection and tried to find a lawyer, she faced a wall of silence. Doctors refused to confirm the poisoning. Lawyers refused to take the case. The company had launched a quiet campaign, paying off medical examiners to falsify reports. They wanted the public to believe the girls were dying of lifestyle diseases, shielding the corporate name from liability. But Grace didn't stop. She found 4 other painters, including Molly's sisters, and a young lawyer named Raymond Barry who was willing to fight. The corporation's strategy was simple: drag out the legal proceedings. The company wasn't trying to prove its innocence. It was trying to outlive its victims. They knew the girls were terminally ill. If they could delay the trial long enough, the plaintiffs would die, and the lawsuit would die with them. When the case finally made it to court in 1928, only 5 girls were left. The scene in the courtroom shocked the public. None of the 5 women were strong enough to lift their right hands to take the legal oath. Grace Fryer couldn't sit upright without a back brace. They had to give their testimonies from wheelchairs and hospital beds. The company had managed to delay the trial, but they had failed to calculate one thing: the power of public outrage. The newspapers picked up the story, splashing the phrase, "the living dead," across front pages nationwide. The corporate defense crumbled under the weight of bad press, and they were forced to settle, paying for the girls' remaining medical care. But the real victory wasn't financial. The bravery of the Radium Girls permanently changed American labor history. Their case established the legal right of individual workers to sue employers for occupational diseases. It directly led to the modern workplace safety standards and protections that protect your life today. But for the survivors, the legal victory couldn't alter the laws of physics. Radium has a half-life of roughly 1,600 years. It outlives empires, movements, and memory. The chain of radioactive decay inside their bones didn't end with their lives. Decades later, scientists exhumed the remains of several dial painters for study. Their bones remain radioactive beneath the soil. More than a century later, a sensitive Geiger counter can still detect them. The glow vanished from their dresses. It vanished from the factory. It vanished from the dance halls. But more than a century later, a Geiger counter can still hear what history tried to bury. What do you think of their story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to discover more history left out of the textbooks, make sure to hit subscribe. The strangest thing about history isn't that these things happened, it's that they're true. I'll see you in the next one.